In honor of Valentine's Day, I wanted to talk about two movies from last year that I absolutely adored that I feel like did not get their due when they released theatrically. With the releases of Lisa Frankenstein and Your Monsters, we saw this trend forming in which young women were dating and falling in love with classic movie monsters. This is not a new thing where we see similar movies come out in the same year, but it was very interesting to me that two movies within this very specific niche were coming out, and I wondered why that is. First, a little backstory on each. Lisa Frankenstein stars Katherine Newton and Cole Sprouse, and it tells the story about Lisa Swallows, who is kind of a social outcast. She is a weirdo who cannot fit in for the life of her. In her free time, she likes to go to the local cemetery and does like crayon pressings of the tombstones. She also witnessed her mother get murdered by a local serial killer, and there's a lot of stigma, a lot of whisperings, a lot of thoughts and feelings from the community surrounding her and that incident. Long story short, the girl is traumatized. One day, Lisa accidentally resurrects a Victorian corpse. As she befriends the monster, she and the monster start going on a killing spree to get more functional body parts for the monster, and in doing so, they kind of start falling for each other. Your Monster stars Melissa Barrera and Tommy Dewey, and it tells the story of Laura, who, similar to Lisa, has suffered a lot of trauma. At the beginning of the film, she is given a cancer diagnosis and has to undergo rigorous treatment, but while undergoing that treatment, her long-term boyfriend dumps her because he can't handle it. The boyfriend is a playwright, and they were working on something together at the time, and he wrote a part specifically for her. Upon completing her treatment, Laura learns that he gave the part away for another woman. Trauma. Are we sensing a theme here? I think in the year 2024, and now as of this video 2025, we are still reckoning with a lot of trauma. In the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think there were a lot of feelings that were seeping their way into the art, into the public consciousness. We saw it in what audiences were seeking out. Look at the Oscars. You know, we had Coda, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Oppenheimer. And I think oddly, all three of those are very significant in marking like what the culture kind of needed and what was like at the top of everybody's minds. In terms of Coda, everybody just needed kind of something warm and fuzzy. Everything Everywhere All at Once kind of just talks about like chaos and finding your people and coming back to them and like trying your best to like strive for kindness amid chaotic and uncertain times. Whereas Oppenheimer is very existential dread and like kind of worries for the fate of humanity as humanity like seeks to discover new things and push the bounds of what is possible. Looking at those three movies though, any way you split it, they are all kind of like a different spin on coming out of complicated and traumatic times. And we didn't even exit those complicated and traumatic times fully. In fact, things are getting even more complicated and more traumatic. Both Lisa Frankenstein and Your Monster, at their core, are about a few things. First and foremost, they are about embracing and making peace with your darkness. Both Your Monster and Lisa Frankenstein at their core are about a few things. First and foremost, they are about embracing and making peace with your darkness, with these qualities that have been considered taboo or uncouth. Secondly, in doing so, these women are able to kind of let go of the stigmas around them and embolden themselves. You know, in these dark and tumultuous times, like a lot comes out and it has an impact on us. It like really puts us in a dark headspace. And I think still society kind of doesn't want to deal with the darkness, right? Lisa Frankenstein, for example, as the film progresses, Lisa grows steadily more confident the more she continues helping her corpse navigate his newfound second life. Yes, they are committing crimes, but like the more she stops trying to be something she's not, the more she just kind of lets go and gives into who she is and what she likes and this person she likes, the more comfortable she becomes with herself. She begins dressing more boldly at school and just kind of owning it. She's feeling more comfortable with standing out. She carries herself higher, like her head is held a little bit higher. Katherine Newton gives a remarkably physical performance, and that's all woven in. Meanwhile, in Your Monster, Laura is learning to specifically embrace her rage. I think Lisa Frankenstein is a little more general with its interpretation of darkness and like what is odd. Your Monster specifically hones in on rage. She's had shitty things done to her. She has been treated like shit by people she has given everything to. And at first, she tries to accept it. She goes and joins the ensemble of the show her ex is putting on in hopes of getting back with him. And all the while, she is allowing herself, her voice, her opinions to stay small. A common thing we see is like Laura's always like making herself smaller until she realizes the hold her ex has on her. And she eventually learns to speak up for herself and other women involved in the show. And she speaks her mind and fully kind of taps into her voice, which culminates in her like fully owning it. She acknowledges her rage. She befriends it. You know, it comes in the form of this monster that's been living in her closet that has kind of always been lurking there. There's so many like really wonderful editing choices where like it starts to bubble up and the monster himself starts to get like agitated and worked up. It's really well done. What your monster taps into beautifully though is like when you suppress it and like put it down, it only comes out in an explosive and violent and bad way. But when you are able to acknowledge it and address it and kind of nurture it a little bit, it's much more healthy, it's much more conducive. I think both of these movies actively push back at the idea that you aren't supposed to talk about taboo things, that you aren't supposed to indulge in darkness, you aren't supposed to nurture these negative feelings, especially with women. I feel like women especially aren't allowed to be these things, be these messy, dark things. A lot of traditional rom-coms love like a glossy image. They love their leads to be these cookie cutter perfect things. A lot of times like the lead, most oftentimes the female lead falls into like the quirky trope and she's messy but it's in a palatable way. Both Lisa Frankenstein and Your Monster allow these women to be messy and complex, but not in a way that's necessarily palatable. They don't like tone it down to make it nice for the audience. We do sit with them and sometimes it is uncomfortable and sometimes you are kind of like, what are you doing? But both of the films allow the women at their centers to be fully layered with these complicated feelings and complicated motivating actions, and instead of it being really neat and tidy, they like sift through the mess and sometimes just sit in the mess. What I love also about these movies, they do function really well as romantic comedies, right? But rather than settle for the ideal man they are presented, both of them have their eyes on men who are the ideal. They are kind of the storybook version of what they should be going after. Rather than settling with them, they wind up with someone who, yeah, is a bit out of the box. And ironically, these men who don't fit the ideal ultimately encourage them to just be themselves and be better than they knew they were capable of. And they see these women for exactly what they are and allow them to express that in totality. And they recognize and applaud the power that surges through them when they are themselves. When Lisa and Laura both respectively kind of hone in on their power, the monsters they are canoodling with aren't turned off by it. They aren't overwhelmed by it. They don't like make a switcheroo. They're very like invested. They're very excited for it. Makes them fall even harder for them. Both of these movies take familiar properties, familiar monsters. You know, we have like a werewolfy kind of thing that lives in the closet. We have Frankenstein, and they repurpose them for a modern age. And I think they use the monster as a way to embrace dark feelings that are deemed abnormal or uncouth. Monsters have always been a metaphor for other, right? They've always represented like fear of the other, fear of outsiders. However, in these modern lenses, the other is actually kind of enticing. The other is kind and the other is needed. These movies like subtly celebrate how like when we make room for things and people that don't fit inside society's confines, we actually enrich our lives more. And rather than tragic ends, the monsters are merely a vehicle to get Laura and Lisa to a place of comfort and uninhibited joy. I adore both of these movies. Your Monster is now out on HBO Max and Lisa Frankenstein is on Peacock. They're really silly, they're really quirky, they're great rom-coms, and they're also fun, like horror adjacent films. Both women leading these movies, Catherine Newton and Lisa Frankenstein and Melissa Barrera in Your Monster, are such powerhouses in their respective roles. They are both like really giving their all in very unique, different ways. Women. These movies make a great double feature outside of spooky season. I think they're a great double feature for Valentine's Day, especially if you're like me and you're just kind of single and jaded. I think these movies are really great for that kind of vibe. But even outside of their respective seasonal holidays that they go well with, I think these are just like enjoyable watches for all the time. Thank you so much for tuning in as I yap about dating scary monsters. Make sure you do all the things you're supposed to do with a YouTube channel. Make sure you comment, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe because I have a lot of great content that I'm prepping for the coming months. I'm really excited about the content on here and I'm so excited to keep going with this ride. And yeah, I will see you on the next one. Bye.